Come on, where'd it go? Right, hopefully it's there. Is that okay, John?
Yes, that's. I can see it perfectly. So
That's
hopefully
great.
everyone can.
Excellent. Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. Before I start on my talk, could I just make one announcement just for your calendars? If you haven't got it already, the next talk, the next presentation will be on Thursday, the 20th of May. Thursday, the 20th of May, at the same time. And Adrian Thomas is going to give us a presentation on the philately of pietism. And my apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, but the 20th of May. And there'll be details, I guess, in Theme Scene or on the website. Anyway, Ladies from Heaven. I hope I don't disappoint too many people by the title, because it's about the postcards showing ladies who have parachuted or support parachutists. And I think I have 32 slides, if I call these slides. And we're going to start with, there was silk. And in the early days, the vast majority of parachutes were made out of silk. And you'll see 3 ladies at the back there. Busily beavering away. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of time to reel it up. And on the right hand side there, you'll see you get more ladies doing the spinning. So already we have 7 ladies involved in parachuting, which takes a lot of time and patience to put together. My next slide there shows the left hand side a silk mill, and dominated by ladies. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving around there, all the workers. And these young lads here were employed to keep the machinery working and unclogging it by crawling under and the machines and clearing up all the mess. And the workers in the shirt and tie, sorry, the managers at the back here. During World War II and the run up to World War II, as most silk had come from Japan, that wasn't really a possibility, so alternatives were sought. And this is a factory in the United States which specializes in the making of rayon. And yes, it turned out quite a massive site, as you can see. So now we have the material, we have to make it. And standard parachutes in those days, round parachutes, were about 28 feet in diameter. Consist of over 20 odd panels, all had to be sewn together. And before the start of mass production, they were all made by hand. And you see some lovely ladies there doing that. Once you've sewn them all together, you need them inspected. And arguably the most famous of all parachute packing inspectors was Marilyn Monroe, who for a very short space of time was a parachute inspector in the United States. And I've said many times to many of you before, I think all thematic collections should have an excuse for showing an image of Marilyn Monroe. But after use, parachutes do need checking and repairing. And again, lots of ladies here whose sole job is to repair parachutes. It must be very exciting to repair them all. But not everybody wants to use a parachute. And umbrellas feature highly in parachuting. So I'm sure Mike will be very pleased to hear that. Notice the airship in the top left-hand corner. This was a depiction of Stanley Spencer, who was an early aeronaut, as they called themselves, and he flew it around London in 1902. This card is a little bit later than that, but depicts the style and the dress of the period. On the right-hand side there, that card is a Bamford card. One of the great publishers of postcards. And And if I may just quote from their own spiel, the world's largest publisher of saucy comic postcards depicting, amongst others, henpecked husbands, large ladies with lots of cheeky captions. And they did 70,000 of those in their lifetime. So I rather like this one. All I can say is, from a parachuting point of view, at least she has a good pair of boots on. Unlike this lady, I rather like this one. I put this in, I rather enjoyed it, so I think it's rather funny. I don't know if they put Blackpool Tower exactly where it is, suggesting she's going to land on it, but I think that's rather nice. And a card on the right, a German card, and here the lady herself has become the parachute for the gentleman below. And again, I thought that was rather fun. That one was sent in 1944, so it's a wartime postcard. So we move on to some early parachutists. This is an interesting one. From a parachute point of view, they are a little on the small side, and hanging on to a handle, not particularly effective. But in terms of the postcard itself, if you look under a small magnifying glass, the amazing detail in the postcard, the drawing of the ladies in particular, the faces are absolutely superb. A lot of time and effort has gone into putting that image together. Now, it's an undivided back from France, which almost certainly means it's pre-1904, when the French had divided back postcards. Yet there's a depiction of Spencer. Yet again, he appears in the middle of the postcard there. So that makes this postcard somewhere between 1902 and 1904. But I rather like that, and I stumbled across this purely accidentally in a dealer's box. Now, I have three parachuting heroines. My wife gets bored to death of me talking about them, I'm sure. And perhaps the lady who could be called the mother of European parachutists is Katy Palace. Arguably the greatest parachutist of her time. She was born in 1868, and in 1893 did what was for her first parachute jump. But they reckon she was the third female parachutist in the world ever. And the other two ladies before her were nearly a century beforehand. So she started a trend in this rather sort of dainty uniform, dressed very much like a sailor. She did 150, 200 jumps, depending who you read it from. Not only was she a great showwoman, she also invented or patented the first packable parachute. And during World War I, she was asked by the German authorities to set up a production line producing thousands of parachutes for the German army, which undoubtedly saved many observation balloons. They weren't for planes, they were for the observation balloons, saved many men's lives. I believe to this day, there are one or two schools in Germany still named after her. And if you have the pleasure of going to the airport servicing Berlin, I believe one of the main roads is still named after her. American parachutist. I haven't been able to find who she is. I've not been lucky enough to find a name, but about 1920, 1930, I would judge from the dress of the people there and the parachuting. Just like in this country, parachutists went from fair to fair and sort of weekend galas, and were paid to make one or two parachute jumps. And this looks like that is happening here. It was called the era of the white border in the States for obvious reason. It was cheaper to produce cards which had less printing space, and the quality of the image itself is nowhere near as good as some of the early European ones. But nevertheless, it does show a female parachutist on the way up. You can see the large aperture at the bottom of the balloon there, so clearly showing this as a hot air balloon. Would have been inflated by putting it over a pit, which itself was being stoked by a rather large bonfire. So a bit of a hazardous operation, and it will not be the first balloon which caught fire or what it did that. But anyway, there we are. So looking at British parachutists. In the early part of the 20th century, Alexandra Palace in London was a centre for all sorts of entertainments, and ballooning and parachutists were but two for a good 10 years in that period. And if you go there today, if it's open today, if you go there, if you go down the right-hand corridor, if you know Alexandra Palace, there are a number of murals on the wall. One of the murals is of the lady who stands on the other postcard, the third in from the left, wearing again this jaunty outfit, Dolly Shepard. And Dolly Shepard spent all her weekends in the summer season going up to galas and fairs all over the country and making parachute jumps, often 2 or 3 a day. The great sadness is she never kept a record of any of them. She parachuted from 1904 to about 1912, when aircraft started to take over ballooning as the entertainment, and she called it quits at that point. But also, she knew that the death rate for parachutists in those days, in a season, so over the summer season, was about 1 in 3 parachutists died. So let somebody else do the maths, but she did it for 8 years. Obviously, she thought her time was, she was pushing her luck a bit, perhaps. So a little bit more about Dolly, and this is a close-up of her jaunty uniform, which she used to go up in. She has one great claim to fame, is that she appears in the Guinness Book of Records as the first aeronautical rescue, where her and another lady went up in a balloon, separate parachutes. The other lady couldn't release her parachute, so she swung across on a trapeze, grabbed hold of her, and they both came down under Dolly's parachute. And she landed very hard and was off work for a couple of months. Interestingly, she did all this at the weekends and on bank holidays, if there were any then, but certainly at the weekends. And during the week, she made hats for a living for her aunt. So to about 2 totally different jobs. And lastly, you can tell I'm a great fan. I'll bore you to death on this alone. The left-hand one, a postcard, is a modern reproduction of a famous postcard which was doing the rounds in the day. I use it because it shows quite clearly this handkerchief, which is actually a Union flag, which he was waving at, which he used to wave at people on the way up. She led a fascinating life, which again I could bore you to death with, but in World War I she was a driver on the Western Front and a mechanic. And in World War II, when she was a good age, you can do the maths, she was an air raid warden for East London, where she lived, and she was in charge of all the public air raid shelters in the East End of London. So bit of a character. The right-hand postcard I particularly like. As you can see, it's got a signature across there, which is definitely hers. And it's very rare to find a signed card. She must have signed thousands in her time, but not many of them have survived, but I have one of them. So it's one of my great pleasures. But sometimes parachute jumps do go wrong. And sadly, this one did. Before I go on to that, though, just can I show you something on the postcard? This is a real photograph picture postcard. You'll see here, there's this blob here is actually a sandbag, a heavy sandbag on one side, balanced by the parachute on the other. The idea is that when Lily Cove, in this case, pulled the cable, a pin would come out from up here, the parachute and she would float down, and now the balloon would be unstable in the sense that it'd be way down on this side, it would turn upside down and all the hot air would come out and the balloon would make its way to the ground, and the balloon owner would hire usually a man in a cart to go and find it somewhere, either in Yorkshire or London, wherever they were doing the show. Well, on the 11th of June, originally this was going to be the job for Dolly. Dolly Shepard was going to take this one, but she was ill. And the story is that about 5 to 10 minutes after this actual picture was taken, this poor lady who was dead, she rose up to not very, about 1,000 feet, jumped. The parachute worked absolutely fine, but for some reasons that nobody will ever know, she misjudged the water, which was getting closer and closer. She didn't want to land in water because she couldn't swim. So she thought she was close enough to the ground where she could jump down. She cut herself out of she clipped herself out of the harness and jumped at the right moment, but they reckon she jumped something like 50 feet or more, and you totally misjudged how far she was from the ground, and was dead on arrival, as they say. That was rather sad. And as many of you know who collect postcards, nothing like a good disaster for the postcard manufacturers to whip out a couple of dozen postcards. We've all seen postcards of trains smashing through railway stations, or upturned vans, or buses. They were very good, and a parachute accident was no exception. And these were a couple of them. And she was just 21 when she died, and these were sold for a couple of years afterwards. The real picture postcard here, a real photograph one, is well faded, but I don't see it very often, so I still kept this copy, but I would like to find a better one. But that was Lily Cove. The other person here I'd like to just tell you about is Amy Johnson. I'm sure you know the name. At the start of World War II, she volunteered for the ATA, which is the air transport, and she was one of many people, not just women, but many women, who flew brand new aircraft or repaired aircraft from wherever they were being made to airfields where they'd be put into use pretty quickly. She was taking an aircraft down south, down to Oxford, I think it was, from Glasgow, if my memory serves me correct. And she got lost in some really atrocious weather. And they believe she bailed out of her aircraft, and they never found her again. Nobody ever saw her again. There was a chance she actually ditched in the Thames. There was a report that somebody went into the Thames at the Kent end. They tried to rescue somebody. They weren't sure it was her or not, but the time scale suggested it might have been. But I'll stick to the parachuting. When the weather got bad and she was running out of fuel, she bailed out in the hope she would land on land, but she never did. And she was 38 when she died, which was, again, a great shame. So these are a bit more interesting in the sense of some very early and somewhat brave parachutists. The Peltier family, the husband doing the piloting of this wonderful plane, and there she is hanging on underneath. This is quite hairy business. And I think the next one, yes. I've enlarged that. It doesn't come up very well, but you get the idea a bit better. There she is being strapped on. The parachute is more than likely this lump under the wing here, and she's holding on to some support across the wheel. I don't know if any of you fancy doing this. You certainly won't catch me doing it. It's certainly a very hairy business. And this is quite interesting as well. This was just before the First World War. And many of you know that parachutes were not given out to pilots of aircraft. They were given out to balloon pilots, observation balloon pilots, but not to pilots of aircraft. And Germany was the first significant power in that, which did allow their pilots in 1918 to have parachutes. And many of them, many of their lives were saved because of them. But the Brits didn't do it right until the very end of the war. I think the Americans did it from day one, but the French and the Brits were very reluctant to give their pilots parachutes. This picture, this postcard has always intrigued me. The aircraft, I spent a long time trying to find this aircraft by staring at pictures, and I think it's a Bristol Bulldog, which is a one-seater aircraft, a fighter aircraft of the day, 1930s. It's difficult to see how this charming lady and a pilot would squeeze in there. Whether it's been modified, because I can't see the rest of the aircraft, I don't know. I think they've got past the days of hanging on underneath. And the parachute here is still too neat and tidy to have been used. I think this is waiting to go. So whether this is strapped into a special bit at the back here or it's been modified, I don't know. But it doesn't quite gel. Or was it just a convenient aircraft to take a pretty picture on? I don't know. But again, a charming young lady. And this was from the 1930s. But now fashions start to change, and fashion for all things parachutes and all things ladies and the attire of ladies. It doesn't start to get practical for some time, and this is a lovely little Swedish card from 1941. I rather like. Yes. I've been desperately trying to find the quote for that, the source of the quote, but I've had that written down for a long time, and the card on the right, I think the pictures are getting a bit more sophisticated. This is also the first time, this card goes back to the 1920s, and it's the first time there's a depiction of a parachuting postcard showing a lady's stockings. And it's a trend which continued for many a year. If anything else, and my wife agrees with me, it just shows you that the majority of postcard designers, painters, artists are men. But there we are. So moving, and here's a French card. What else could it be? A French card. What can you say? Again, from the 1940s, more likely shortly after the war. The French obviously, in their eyes, invented the miniskirt in those days, but not the most ideal thing to parachute in. So this 1936 postcard is very pleasant. Flowers feature a lot. If it's not stockings, it's flowers. And the person on the left-hand side here under a nice round parachute was quite nice. For those of you who aren't familiar with printing techniques, the halftone I've referred to a few times. It means that the picture is effectively lots of little teeny dots, which you can see under a magnifying glass quite easily. And the more dots per, excuse me, the more dots there are per inch, the darker it is. And in the 30s, they started using mixture of coloured dots, not just black and white, but actually coloured dots as well. And it was a nice card of that. And on the right-hand side, 1950s card, but I think this is quite a charming one. Again, wrapped up in a fur coat, which is very suitable for parachuting, perhaps. But I love the dog. I thought the dog is wonderful. In fact, that would not have been the first time I've seen a dog in a parachute. Dogs were used fairly extensively during the Second World War and others. They were used quite a lot to be used as guard dogs. most of the British ones, by all accounts, when they were used in Normandy, all ran away, which is not surprising if suddenly you were thrown out of an aircraft if you were a dog, you know, wonder what the heck is going on. But there we are. But I think that's a charming depiction of a dog, and of a lady carrying some roses or something like that. And all I can say in terms of parachuting dress, at least again, they're wearing boots. Still not very appropriate attire. I can't quite imagine how this works, but there we are. Again, this is an American card, a Linden card, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Linden cards. You can, if you look carefully, you can see the mesh of the linen underneath. And during the Second World War and onwards, for a number of years, American cards were produced like that. And if you look very carefully, even the Americans now have got the hint of the stocking topper as well. But obviously it's too risky for some people. Here on the left-hand side was the original postcard from the 1940s. But when they wanted to use that postcard to raise money for buying war bonds, they had to make it suitable for a G rating, which was for general release. So the stockings went and the skirt got longer. And I've seen a few like this, but I think this was appropriate for this one. Again, you can see again it's been printed on linen, and the one on the right hand side is in quite good condition, and on the back it says buy war bonds. And this one is very similar. A slight change in the wording, but again, no stockings, but a pair of ladies' legs coming out of the toilet. They have disappeared, and the reverse I've shown there of the postcard with the no legs, if I may call it, is about buying war bonds. So obviously they wanted to make it suitable for a G rating. And as I said many times before, I think humour is often used in extreme sports or extreme events, and parachuting is certainly one of those. Now, my most favourite, if that's English, my favourite postcard is this one, and I think it's rather good. I'm sure you can read the words. I think it's quite funny, and this was posted in 1943, American card, and I think for an American card, this was incredibly risky. They're not, most of their cards are very subdued in that sense, but nevertheless, I think it's very funny and a very nice card, and certainly my favourite one. Right, I am sure you've seen these. These are called pull-out cards, obviously French ones, and you can have these for dozens of different locations. You can see there's 3 of them there. What I'd like to point out to you, they're using the same picture. I rather like this bit here, the lady dragging her boyfriend stroke husband away from these charming 7 ladies jumping a parachute. I thought it was rather good. All these gentlemen here staring up at them, but quite, yeah, a fun little card. And when you pull the tab, there's a tab there, you get a pictures, black and white pictures of wherever that they are. This one I rather like. I've tried to expand it a bit and put them here. And again, this is some French location. I thought the top picture I could just about go with, you know, a nice fishing scene, like fishing a fishing quay or something like that. But your guess is as good as mine what this old pier and sort of the tide was out photograph is about. I'm sure that's very attractive. And this one, again, I'm not sure what it's meant to be, but hardly the most attractive advert for the place. But there we are. Perhaps they've faded with time. But you see lots of these types of cards, and these happen to be 3 French ones, but you get them in this country, Italy, and in Germany as well. Oh, some interesting luggage. We talk about flowers, we've mentioned dogs. Suitcases on this one, which is rather fun, and flowers on this one. This one is from 1946, a Phyllis Cooper postcard, which is very nice. I like the colours, they're nice and sharp, nice and clean. I rather like that card, and a little parachute there, and the flowers on the right-hand card there. Someone spent a lot of time on that, and that's quite an old card. That's about 1910-ish, and I think the colours have stayed quite bright on that. So, some impractical fashions, there we are. I rather like this one. This one was from the 1938 World Fair held in New York, and it had, it's a linen card again. You can just about make out the linen in the weave there. And this was particularly relevant because this particular structure I'm moving the cursor over here almost certainly is meant to depict the parachute ride, which was incredibly popular at the World Fair, and they would hoist you up to the top, then let you go, and you would float down some wires so you couldn't drift off anywhere in ones and twos, and it was very, very, very popular. And again, we have the stockings. The one on the right, again, it made me laugh. I rather like it. This poor lady, it's a Bamford card as well. This poor lady is having some problems keeping her skirt in the right place. And bring us right up to date. This is 1980, I think 1990, this card. So it's been screen printed, modern card. And these ladies were a parachuting team, and they using these modern parachutes, and they were stacking on top of what they call stacking on top of each other. And I just looked it up before I came on this evening. The world record for this stacking currently stands at 23. So it's 23 parachutes stacked on top of each other. And that's a record held by the Royal Marines, which they set in 2020. So yes, that looks quite good fun. And almost my last card, my last slide, sorry, but certainly the last one on this presentation. They're all underground now. The parachute is being pulled together by this lady here, who's wearing some nice warm gloves by the looks of it, and a proper one-piece parachute jackets and trousers. Again, quite colourful. From memory serves me correct, this is a Russian Soviet card, and it's quite nice, quite colourful. So that's the end of my presentation, but before I do, I just want to show you two more slides. When is a postcard not a postcard? Well, I saw this on a well-known website, auction site, about a month ago, and I thought it was absolutely wonderful. It would fit in so nicely in the collection. You know, it's the finish of the journey, parachute, two children hitting the ground. It would do very well at the end. So I bid for it, and it only cost a few pounds. But when I got it home, I looked at it and I really liked it. The colours were really exciting, and I turned it over, and it wasn't a postcard. Sadly, it was a business card. I dashed back to have a look at it to see if I was being done out of my £3, but it didn't mention the word postcard at all. It was just my assumption. So yes, when you're buying postcards, you really want to see both sides of it. Well, £3 is £3, but at least it wasn't 30. So there we are. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Shall I stop sharing now, John?
Yes, and I'll stop recording